Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I think we could just go ahead and begin. Thank you for having me. My name is Shamsuddin Wahid. I'm your substitute today, and I have a few things to share, a little bit of a PowerPoint, and so I think I'll just go ahead and begin. So the focus is on. I mean, you've been taking this class for a while, and each class has a different subject, and today's subject is more along to do with dehumanization, which is something which has been emerging in this particular conflict. Now, let me go back to the first one here. Yeah, okay, just the second one. Yeah, so I'm actually going to begin by referencing a quotation by the Brazilian philosopher called Paulo Freire. I hope I said his name correctly. He said, quote, "Dehumanization, although a concrete historical fact," you see this at the bottom, "Dehumanization, although a concrete historical fact, is not a given destiny, but the result of an unjust order that engenders violence in the oppressors, which in turn dehumanizes the oppressed." So this is where we're going to begin. So you see on the big text, you see a couple of quotations that we are looking at to look at the issue of dehumanization. So the first one is from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which he said in October 2023. He says, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says our Holy Bible, and we do remember. And then the quotation at the bottom from the then Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says, "We are fighting against animals." So what better examples of dehumanization than these two terms, these two expressions? But
what is Amalek?
Yeah, so Amalekites, I hope I'm saying it properly, is a name of a group in the Bible. So actually, that's going to come in, I think, slide 6 or 7.
What Bible is it
In Deuteronomy.
What?
Deuteronomy,
Deuteronomy.
Old Testament.
Deuteronomy. Okay.
In the Old Testament.
Old Testament, yeah. Yeah. And actually, we're going to come. There is a quotation, I think, in slide 7 or 8 that shows the exact quotation of the Amalekites. But basically, the Amalekites were a people who, according to their understanding, were fighting to annihilate the Israelites. So when he says this, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says the Holy Bible, and do remember. So his Prime Minister Netanyahu's assertion, he was comparing the Palestinians to them. And so if you don't want to use religious language, then there's other language, much more dehumanizing. At least Amalekites are humans. We are fighting against animals. So this is how he describes the Palestinians. He's not the foreign minister now, but he was at the time. Yoav Gallant. So actually here, if you look at the bottom if you look at the very bottom, because this projection actually has my comments as well. It actually references from Deuteronomy 25:19. And so it says, quote, "Blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven." That's the quotation. So it's Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 19. So there was actually maybe stop for a moment. Are there any questions or comments before moving on? Okay. All right. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, in referring to any group of people
Yeah.
as vermin
Yeah.
or animals,
Yeah.
let's face it, Hitler did that,
Yeah.
and Jews should have learned from that.
That's also part of this.
Oh,
You'll see that also as part of this presentation.
Okay.
But yeah, that's true.
when you dehumanize.
Yes. And even going back to the words of the the Brazilian philosopher earlier, when he spoke about the dehumanization process. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, when you're in war and you talk about guerrilla warfare, guerrilla warfare speaks to the animalistic type of fighting where you are therefore treated like an animal in the attack on this type of battling warfare. So if you want to be dehumanized, that's what every country does when they're at war. They dehumanize the enemy so that it's not morally wrong to advance on them. So in order to protect yourself, even if it's in a line of defense, you have to say, these people are not acting like people, they're acting like mad animals. They're acting...
You dehumanize them.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have to or you can't kill them
We
because
can't kill 'em.
morally we can't,
We gotta kill them.
yeah, morally we have to stop them, one way or the other. And if you put a gun in our hands, we'll use the gun. You put a knife in our hands, we'll use the knife. You put a law book in our hands and we'll charge against them legally. But everybody, even the Palestinians have done that to the Israelis. Called them horned animals, called them all kinds of crappy things. So they're dehumanizing their enemy, so to speak.
I'll come back in a moment.
Can
Yes,
we
ma'am.
go with your slide and then leave room for questions?
That's perhaps a good idea. That's perhaps a good idea. So, but don't let me forget to come back to your what you shared. All right. So the next item on the slide here is actually 3 photos, 2 of whom you may know, and then the middle one would probably be a bit of a surprise. So, and I shared this for a reason because of what's going to come on the next slide. So this photo rather, obviously is Prime Minister Netanyahu. And then on the right is, again, former Defense Minister, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And then in the middle, this young man with the tuxedo, this is actually a evangelical Christian pastor by the name of John Hagee. John Hagee is perhaps...
John Boyd. Oh.
That looks
No,
like John
Hagee.
Boyd.
No, it's Hagee. It's
No,
Hagee.
he's portraying John Hagee, but his,
No, that's Hagee.
Oh,
That's Hagee. He's not wearing glasses. Usually he wears glasses. This photo he's not wearing glasses.
That's not John
Oh, it looks
Boyd.
like John Boyd.
After
Okay.
exercise.
Poor guy.
Yeah, actually, I have his book here. I think it has his photo on it as well.
Looks just like that.
Honestly,
Let me see. This is it. Okay, this is an older, younger version of him. Okay, John Hagee.
He has the misfortune of looking like what's-her-face's father.
John Boyd.
Yeah, John Boyd. Yeah. Poor guy.
Well, I could make a joke, but I'm not going to make the joke.
Doppelganger.
So now let's share why I put those photos there. So John Hagee, he was the guy in the middle. Okay, the guy in the middle, and so he has a couple of quotations from, and this is the book here. It's called Can America Survive? 10 Prophetic Signs That We Are the Terminal Generation. So by the way, everyone who knows who John Hagee is, right?
Well, now we do.
Now you do, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a televangelist. He's a
Okay.
very popular, important political figure. He's not just a Sunday preacher, he's a very important political figure. And I've been following his career for at least 20 years, if not longer. All right, so these are the quotations from, this is the book right here, if anyone wants to see a physical copy of the book. But I happen here on the PowerPoint. So this is what he says. So dehumanization. This sort of goes back, to the previous comment about dehumanization. So dehumanization being based on really, we can say, scare tactics. Okay. So this is what John Hagee says. Again, this is in his book. He says, "It is their desire, their hope, and their absolute ambition to die in a war against Christians and Jews to please Allah." Okay. And by the way, I forgot to mention who exactly he is. John Hagee is also the head of something called Christians United for Israel, which is considered the largest Zionist organization in the United States. So this is the first thing he says. Let me repeat it. It is their desire, whose desire? Meaning Arabs and Muslims. Yeah. It is their desire, their absolute ambition to die in a war against Christians and Jews, so please Allah. Allah is the Arabic word for God. Okay, and I'll explain that part in a minute because I think it needs some explanation. And the second thing he says in the same book, and the page number is there, page 107, he says, and this connects back to the Amalekites I mentioned earlier. Okay, he says God's pledge to curse any nation that attacked Israel is demonstrated in the attack of the Amalekites upon Israel. Okay, so meaning that what John Hagee has done, and not just him, there are many other figures in evangelical Christian circles, is that they have said, look, the Bible says the one who curses Israel, God curses, right? The one who is opposed to Israel, God opposes, right? So they've employed this language, they've employed these scriptural passages in order to build a religious support for the state of Israel. And I had a meeting with, which I would say, an Islamophobe. Before Thanksgiving, I had a meeting with this gentleman, and I'm not going to say his identity or anything like that, but he's kind of famous in these Christian circles, goes around preaching Christianity, the end of the world, and things like that. He's kind of famous. If I told you his name, you would find him. And he told me, in so many words, actually directly, not even so many words, that, when it came to the issue of Israel, his issue with Israel is that Israel is God's chosen people. That was his issue. Israel is God's chosen people, and that support for the state of Israel, regardless of what they do, regardless of what they are about, is a religious mandate for Christians. Okay, so what I'm saying here is in terms of dehumanization that has happened on certain levels. The first level is the level of fear, that these people are animals. As the Israeli foreign minister said, these people are animals, and these people are like the people who are attacking the Israelites according to the Bible in the biblical times. So these were two ways that dehumanization took place. And again, the source is this book. If anyone wants to take a look at it to confirm that my assertion is true. There's another part much more scary than these. Much more scary than this. So let's move on to the next.
Scarier than the Bible?
Pardon?
Are you saying it's scarier than the Bible?
The assertions that I just read, okay, were from Pastor John Hagee. He has even more scary things to say to this. Okay, and I think this next slide shows that now. Yes, here we go. No, that's not it. Hold on. Did I skip something? I think I skipped something. Where did it go? Okay, well, I'll go through this because I think maybe it's... All right, there we go. All right, so by presenting Arabs specifically and Muslims generally, because not all Arabs are Muslim, by the way.
Right.
There are many Arabs who are Christian.
Right.
There's a great number of Palestinian Christians. By presenting Arabs specifically, Muslims generally as extremists, as fanatical subhuman creatures. Why do that? It is to create the agenda for continued political, economic, and social support for violence against Palestinians generally, or specifically, or Arabs against Arabs generally. And you may remember, this was not that long ago, just a few months ago, that there was an outcry in Israel itself because there was something called right to rape, meaning right, R-I-G-H-T, right to rape. So in meaning to use rape against Palestinian women as a way to deter attacks against Israel. This became a thing in Israel not that long ago, and there was a column in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and there was a column by Sapir. Forgive me, I don't say the names correctly. Sapir Slucker Amran. It said, quote, "By legitimizing rape, Israeli society takes one step further towards moral decay." So that is something. Now comes the other part. That's scary, but there's another one that's even more. That's also scary. Now going back to John Hagee. And he says on page 108, 109 of this book. And this book, I think, is from 98 or 2000. Let me see before I... 2010, I'm sorry. This is newer. This is from 2010. This book was published in 2010. He says, quote, the boundaries of the sacred real estate, because Israel, the land is given by God. That's what they say, isn't it? The boundaries of the sacred real estate encompasses an area far greater than the state of Israel presently controls. The day will come, you see at the bottom? The day will come when Israel will own and control all of present-day Israel, okay, including Jerusalem, Lebanon, the west bank of Jordan, okay, so Jordan is a neighboring country, and most of Syria, most of Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. Would that be a reason for people to be scared? Would that be a reason for people to be scared?
Yes, and never-ending wars here.
Never-ending wars. Never-ending wars. Expansion.
Never-ending agendas.
Yeah, expansion of the state of Israel. And this is, again, this is not some sort of new thing. You know, this idea. This is not some sort of new thing. So let's move on to the next. Yes, ma'am.
But this is one person's book, one person's opinion, who is definitely off his rocker and skewed. And we here in our country can put on AM radio or Fox News and hear the same crazies talking in
But
the same
this is just
babble.
there's truth to what you're saying, but this isn't just some ordinary crazy in a shack in the woods somewhere. You know, this is like it's just. And
Could you go back one slide,
yes, sir.
please? And I'll help you with this.
Okay.
All right, so you have to realize that Haaretz would be the opposite of the Las Vegas Journal Review.
Correct.
In other words, Haaretz is a liberal newspaper in Israel. There are numerous newspapers in Israel, just like there are numerous newspapers. We have two here.
Right.
One subjugates the other one,
Right.
but we technically have two. And the Sun would have more of a liking for articles from Haaretz than the Review Journal would.
Correct.
All right, so I'm just putting into context that part for us. And then, oh, by the way, Christianity is a broad thing even in the United States.
Right.
There are people that belong to follow Catholicism, normal Baptists, normal Methodists, normal Christian denominations. There are evangelicals, and then there are those wealthy Texas megachurches. Please accept my apology if any of you watch those, listen to those, and send money to them after their appeals on a Sunday. We apologize for being someone of that sort of Mid-South background myself. It is unfortunate, but in America, they can buy an awful lot of media. And that Hagee guy owns an awful lot of media,
Yes.
and he gets phenomenal coverage. Okay? All right, go ahead.
Well, well, actually, I should sit down and you should come up here, because in essence, I don't know your name, sir, but what you shared is in essence my point in your comment, because again, you're right. Anybody can say anything, especially in the age of the internet.
Yeah.
But this is not an ordinary guy who said off his rocker.
Right.
He's not an ordinary person. He's somebody with significant.
Thank Billy Graham.
He's somebody
or
with
Roberts.
he's somebody with significant political and social influence. Okay, and not just him. He's not the only one, but he happens to be one of the individuals whose writings I have followed over the years. I own most of his books. You know, I've seen some of his lectures. I've never met him in person. I don't think he'd want to shake my hand. But the thing is that is that the main reason, this goes back to another thing, which actually the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Talks about in his book, which I referenced the last time I was here, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But the main reason that evangelical Christians support the state of Israel is because they want to lay the groundwork for the coming of Jesus. Because Jesus is supposed to come back, the 12 tribes are supposed to emerge, and the whole scenario in the book of Revelation. So in order to make that come true, the support for Israel is taking place. I mean, there's a lot of deeper history to that, but that's it in a nutshell.
So the interesting thing
Yeah.
to that was last week's class.
Okay.
So to keep this in context, I'm not Jewish, so please accept my humble apology. It's interesting to watch settlers, i.e. Jewish legal or illegal residents of Western settlements in the West Bank and near Gaza use these evangelical Christians as reasons for fundraising and expansion, when you consider, if you really ask them, has the Messiah already come, and what is the second coming of the Messiah? The lady will tell you after you turn off your microphone that no, it hasn't occurred.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting when you put all of that in the context of an actual war that's happening in Palestine and Israel today.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of my friends here, we weren't close, but we knew each other for a long time. And she called herself an Israeli Christian. She traveled back and forth. Her family had been there for decades and owned a lot of property. We had some in-depth conversations. But in my opinion, and no offense to Christianity, because I'm barely a Jew, but I always felt listening to that was just so much hype. They could care less about the Jewish people.
Exactly.
You either convert or you're going to die with the rapture. That's how they feel. We want the land. We want the land because the land, we've got to be in that land when Christ comes back to earth. They could give two hoots about saving Jews.
And I alluded to that, and I said when I had a recent meeting with somebody who thinks that way, one of the leading preachers in this country. But also, this has been something that's happened for a long time. It's not just a recent phenomenon that they want to support the state of Israel for these messianic reasons. They want.
Where were those same people when 6 million were being slaughtered?
Yeah.
Where were those same good Christians?
Yeah. Actually, in this, I'm gonna avoid. I'll refer to this book in a second. And your classmate had a suggestion that I wait until the end to go to the question. So,
So we have the presentation.
That's a sign.
Don't tell me your battery died.
That you should teach the class.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So before it dies again, let's see. Let's go to the next one here. I think I read that one already.
Yeah.
I read that one. Read that one.
Yeah, you're there.
Okay. So I feel like I skipped something, but all right. Now, the other angle to this, which is employed by not only by Zionist supporters but also by Christian Zionists, is that their argument is that Arabs generally, Muslims generally, and Arabs specifically, want to do a genocide against the Jews. Okay, this is one of their arguments that they have made, and that really it's a war between Jews and Muslims, or it's a war between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. That, you have these two religions on one side, and then you have one religion on the other side, and the other religion is a bunch of fanatical people that want to chop off heads and all this kinds of stuff. So there is an organization called JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, and they are totally against the Zionist agenda. Okay, I tried to find a photo to really put on here, but I didn't really have the room. But anyway, this is listed on their website, which is jewishvoiceforpeace.org. We unequivocally oppose Zionism because it is counter to these ideas. And if you read the context of the slide, it says the ideas of justice, equality, and freedom for all people. So part of the reason I'm sharing this is to show that basically, look, is that those who are open-minded, they see what the reality is. Okay, those who have not been guilty of dehumanization, they see what the realities are. That it is really an issue of oppression, of violence, of genocide. These are the real issues. And by doing so, by employing Judaism, it is a disservice to Judaism. I mean, let me say it like this. This might be new information. Muslims, Christians, and Jews believe in Moses. You know that? Moses is, I'm a Muslim, and I'm actually one of the teachers of the Islamic religion in the city. Moses is more, his name and story is more in the Quran than Prophet Muhammad. And Muslims and Christians and Jews can agree that Moses, one of his functions was as a liberator. That his society, his community was under threat of genocide. According to scripture, I think the Quran says this, and I'm sure that I believe the Bible says this as well, is that Pharaoh had this idea of killing all the males and leaving the females alive, right? And that Moses' mother put the baby Moses in a box in the river as a last-ditch effort to save him, right? So I'm sharing that to share that since we all have this story in common, it should not be framed, and I believe this very strongly. This should not be framed as a religious war. Now there are religious elements. Yes, there are religious elements. There are religious elements because, again, the idea that Jesus is going to come back and that the Jewish tribes have to be there in order for Jesus to come back. That the presence of Wailing Wall, the presence of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So there are religious elements, but it's not a religious conflict per se. And again, if you look at history, I heard someone referencing Ottoman Empire earlier, or even if you go even before Ottoman Empire, is that the Muslims and Christians and Jews, they lived there in peace. They lived there in peace. There are some periods here and there where things happen, but as a general rule, where did Jews flee when facing persecution in Christian Europe? They didn't flee to Mars. They didn't have a spaceship to Vulcan or whatever the characters on Star Trek. No, they fled to Muslim places. They fled to Morocco. They fled to Turkey. They fled to Egypt. They went to many different places in the Muslim world. So it's not a. In fact, Muslims and Jews have more in common than Muslims and Christians. Muslims and Jews have more in common than Muslims and Christians. I mean, a Muslim and a Jew are sitting down, they could gather at lunch and have a BLT sandwich. We're not gonna get together and do that.
We can't sit and have a BLT.
No.
I know it's a superficial example, but
You might have a lettuce and tomatoes.
I wish I could say that sounded appetizing, but it really doesn't. Okay, so next slide here is entitled "The Importance of Justice as a Mindset." And so we have here this image, Dr. Martin Luther King. Everybody knows him. There's no mistaking him for John Hagee or the other guy you said in the previous slide. Yes. So in the time of Dr. Martin Luther King, in the time of Dr. Martin Luther King, he was seen as a communist. He was seen as someone creating sedition in this country. He was seen as an anarchist. And now, of course, years after his assassination, he's not viewed as well. He's viewed as a moral leader, as a hero. But this is what he says. He says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. This is a really beautiful quote. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So he wrote this from Birmingham jail. If you remember the account of why he was there. There's another thing I want to share here. This is a hadith. A hadith is a recorded statement of the Prophet Muhammad. Muslims call this hadith. I'm not trying to preach religion, so please, I want to make it clear, I'm not here to preach religion. That's not my job here. But I thought that this quotation would be a very important quotation. So the quotation says that the Prophet Muhammad says, peace be upon him, he says, to help your brother when he is oppressed as well as when he is the oppressor. And so the followers of the Prophet said to him, how can we do that? We understand how to help our brother when he's oppressed. How do we help him when he is an oppressor? And so the Prophet says, you stop him from doing the oppression. Okay, you stop him from doing the oppression. So I thought that this was a very important statement to make. So again, it's to kind of circle back. I don't know what the other teacher says. I don't know what other voices you've heard, but I don't think it is a religious conflict in nature. There are religious elements, but that's not the same thing as religious conflict. That I don't think it's that, but it is really an issue of oppression, oppressors, and oppressed. Okay. So with that, now we get to the part which I think will be very interesting, is what everybody had to share. So Madam's question or statement earlier, if I remember it, what did you say earlier? I
said it goes both ways.
It goes both ways. So you're talking in terms of dehumanization.
Dehumanization goes both ways.
Yeah, that's what she's saying. Dehumanization goes in both ways. But the thing is, you have to remember, is where does all of this start? All of this starts with an ideology that is in itself a dehumanizing ideology. Zionism is a dehumanizing ideology, and it's something which should be, I would say, it should be recognized. It should be recognized, because how else? Oh, go ahead.
I just want to ask you, when
Yeah.
you say ideology, what are you talking about?
Ideology.
are you talking about religion? Are you talking about politics? You're talking about...
So ideology and theology are two different things.
What?
Ideology and theology are two different things.
Okay.
Zionism is at core not a religious theology. In fact, its early founders were not religious themselves. It is a political ideology. A political ideology. Okay. So
I wanted to know his definition, not
Makes sense.
well,
what it is or something.
well, I mean, this definition should be the global universal definition. I don't think anyone should disagree with how this is. I have defined, I have shared this explanation. I don't think it's something that should be disputed. But what I'm saying here is, again, that Zionism as an ideology has created this notions of the other as being animals, and that it becomes okay to deal with animals as you see fit. And let me give another example from the American context. In the American context, you have the transatlantic slavery. And among the were not Africans dehumanized? Were they not dehumanized?
Couldn't vote.
I mean, you're talking about voting is a minor thing. I'm talking about like 5 centuries or 4 centuries. Voting is a new thing. So they were dehumanized. Yes, sir.
If I may, up to England's outlawing of slavery in 1833, slavery, which unfortunately was predominated against those people that were white Anglo-Saxons by people of British descent. But here's a key point, including even in America, it wasn't wasn't limited to that. In other words, there were slaves and indentured servants in our colonies and up until the Emancipation Act
Correct.
that were white,
Mhm.
Native American, European, and non-European, as well as black.
That's true.
Now, granted, it was predominantly black, but due to our not teaching our history, we aren't really taught that.
So,
We aren't taught that in grammar school, we're not taught that in high school, and unless you take the right courses at the right kind of college, you're probably not even taught that at college. But it is a truism. Many Americans, like the entire nation of Australia, most of the early Australian settlers had no choice. They were told, get on that boat and go. You're a prisoner, we're cleaning out our prisons here, you need to go. And the good news is they built a thriving nation from that. But it's not like most of them said, yeah, I'd love to go over there, please sign me up for it. We have a lot of people that helped us build our colony that were looking like an awful lot of us in this room that were here because they were
I think we
indentured
digress
servants.
from.
we have.
We've
But-
way digressed.
Yeah, so I will try to circle back so we can able to stay focused. I agree with what you said though.
Yeah.
And the point I was making was the dehumanization part. Okay. Now I will state what you were just sharing for just a second, so we can go back to the original subject, is that there's a book, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's called White Trash. If I'm not mistaken, White Trash. If I'm not mistaken, that's the name of the book. And it details much of what. I hope I'm not mixing it up with another book, but it details much of what you were sharing. And in essence, that the Africans were found to be more suitable for physical work.
Well,
And that's
once we decided it was rice, it needed to be black. Sorry.
Yeah. Again, going back to the dehumanization part. Now, in one of the commentaries of the Bible, I have it at home, it identified Africans as the sons of Ham. Ham is one of Noah's sons. And according to the Bible tradition, he saw his father naked and made fun of him. And so as a consequence, he's cursed. And so they said, well, who is Ham's children? And the Africans. So it became it became used as a justification for slavery in this format. So again, the dehumanization part, what I was trying to share, the point I was making is the dehumanization part is something that has happened, and it's something which is not right. Yes, ma'am. I haven't forgotten you.
To me,
Yeah.
the word Zionism
Yeah.
was almost a state of mind in the ideology. Herzl looked upon it, there was very little religion, and it is devolved, and I think this class is skewed on talking about how bad it is and how bad it's become. It's like I, who considered myself a liberal,
Yeah.
although I wear the little black dress and pearls as a conservative Connecticutite, but as a liberal, now being a liberal is a dirty word. And it has taken on that same meaning,
Yeah.
and words, things like that. My father, who was a butcher and had many Muslim clients, because my grandfather was a kosher butcher. And so he used to say, labels are for cans and titles are for books. You are the person
I like
you
that.
are
I like
when
that.
you're looking
I like
in
that.
someone's eyes.
I like that. I
And
like
he was
that.
a very smart man.
I like that
I
expression.
miss him every day. Anyway,
I
so,
like that.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It just seems to have layer upon layer,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
And we also know in Israel, there's the Free newspaper, by the way, that's owned by the Adelson family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the family here that owns the RJ, the newspaper they own in Israel is a free paper. Yeah.
So I see this young lady back here is aching did you have your hand up?
Well, I did, because I guess I'm at the point where I wanna ask you.
Yeah, please.
So now what?
Yeah.
So, yes. So I shared this view in my last time I was here, and I don't know what the other teacher's view is. We have not sat down to discuss this. And again, I'm not in control. I'm not a politician. I'm not in control of things. But I think, this as far as my humble political analysis, that if you put religion aside, then the solution to this is the South Africa model. The South Africa model was, I'll say it again for those who were not here the last time that I was here. The South Africa model was basically that the whites came to the country and they colonized that country, as they did all over Africa, as they did everywhere. And eventually a resistance emerges, with the black majority. And this resistance took many forms. But at the end of the day, it removed the apartheid system and put the majority in power. The majority of black people, the majority of their blacks, they put it in power. They didn't ask the whites to get the hell out. There was no get on the boat and go back to Germany or England or wherever that they came from. That kind of thing didn't happen. So, but for that South Africa model, what happened in South Africa, you had a Nelson Mandela figure, and you also had a de Klerk figure. And do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is a de Klerk?
No.
No, let me put his picture up here again. Is he a de Klerk figure? No, he's not a de Klerk figure. He's not a de Klerk figure. And certainly John Hagee here is not a de Klerk figure, because I don't know if John Hagee himself, but Pat Robertson, I don't know if John Hagee is guilty of this, but Pat Robertson was. They saw Mandela and ANC as terrorists. They saw them as terrorists. And they made public statements against Mandela. So I don't know if he's guilty of that as well. I don't want to say he is without knowing, and then I end up guilty of saying something wrong. Yes, ma'am.
And of course, to bring it right back home,
Yes.
we now have an Elon Musk, who is an unelected prime minister, who grew up during apartheid in South Africa, who technically is an immigrant, and we know what's happening to immigrants in our country.
Yeah.
So you can't make this stuff up on how the world is on fire.
Yeah.
And this man that I used to revere in Netanyahu is just continuing a war and killing and maiming and doing awful things to stay out of prison.
Yeah.
And it's a disgrace.
Yeah.
And he and Trump together,
Yeah, exactly right. Yes, ma'am.
Well, so if you had, if you ruled the world, and if you had the magic eight
You're gonna be tempted now.
how, so what needs to happen?
Well,
This could go on for millennia.
Yeah. So as I said, this is my personal opinion. My personal opinion would be the same solution that happened in the South Africa context. That would be my personal opinion. But what that would mean, in a practical sense, just as happened in the South Africa context, is the end of, in South Africa, it was the end of the apartheid state. So it had to be the end of the Zionist state, because Zionist state is inherently a racist state. In fact, Zionism and apartheid are cousins. They might even be blood sisters. Okay. So that would have to be the solution. Now, in contrary to the rhetoric that has been advanced especially in the media for many years, if you talk to the various political parties among the Palestinians, they are not this kind of like neo-Nazi type people. They're not people that want to imitate Nazism. They don't have that. They don't have that thinking at all. That's propaganda that's been employed against them. Okay, so anyway, I would say that again, if we put the religious sentiments, religious emotions aside, then that would have to be the solution. Because let's face it, let's face it, there are stats. I didn't bring the stats with me because I didn't think about this issue, but Palestinians give birth more than Israelis.
Yeah.
So by that very fact alone, then the whole Zionism project is going to collapse. Anyway, naturally. So, anyway, that's my opinion. That's my opinion on your. I hope I
No,
achieved
that's why I asked.
Yeah.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
So is it naive of me to think that this class, the structure, the content, the theme of this class could be a debate, if you will, week by week, between a Muslim and a Jew?
The thing is, the two answers to that. Well, it's actually three. First answer, I've only been here twice. I don't know if I'm going to come back again. So I have no.
There's only one more week.
Oh, there's only one more week.
You got one more chance.
All right. So maybe we'll see if I come back if I have time. But so one thing, I have no control over that. Secondly, most importantly, is this should not. I repeat, it should not be seen as a religious debate between Muslims and Jews.
Agreed.
Muslims and Jews can debate about religion. Yeah, we can debate about a number of religious things. That's not a problem. A Muslim and Jew can debate about Jesus, because Muslims believe in Jesus, but Jews do not believe in Jesus. They can have a debate, but have a debate about this point that makes it seem as if this is a religious issue in general, and it's not. It is an issue of oppression and oppressed. It is an issue of land and blood. It's not an issue of religion. So that'll be the second. I had a third point, but unfortunately I've forgotten it.
That's okay. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Any more slides?
Yeah. Do I have a discussion with the class? That's the next slide. So what I do have here is, when I came before, I had referenced from memory a couple of books, and so today I brought those books with me. Okay, this one book here is by an Israeli academic called Shlomo. I hope I pronounced it. Shlomo Sand. It's called The Invention of the Jewish People, and I admit I'm not finished yet. I'm only at page 205, and basically, as he says, that he goes through the foundational myths of Zionism and of the state of Israel. And it says so far, these are the notes I've taken, and I'm only on page 205, but I think I'll pass it around if you all want to take a look.
Sounds like hard work.
It is hard work, yes.
If you only got
All right, so pass it around. So the second book, actually, I thought, to be honest with you, I thought this was a very fair book. This is by the Israeli ambassador to the United States. His name is Michael Oren, and his book is called Power, Faith, and Fantasy: America in the Middle East, 1776 to the present. I was actually surprised. I was expecting this to be. Yeah, I think they may have an audio version of it. Yeah. So this do I have another one? Okay, yeah. So this one said Power, Faith, and Fantasy. It's by the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. It goes through a lot of history, including the history of Zionism, early history of Zionism, and really in general the history of the relationships between the U.S. and the Arab world from the time of independence. So I thought that was actually very interesting. I think it might have been his doctoral thesis or something. It's actually, I thought it was a pretty fair book, even though it was Israeli ambassador to the U.S. And if you see on the back pages, you see my notes. If you look on the back pages, like you'll see some of the things I thought were interesting. So I don't know if they'll interest you as well.
Very small print.
And my handwriting, and also my handwriting is, yes, I have a doctor's handwriting.
Do it while you're young.
Trust me, it gets worse.
See that?
This is heavy, this is
1776.
Okay, this is the kind of books I read. I'm sorry. This is the kind of books I read.
Like I say, do it now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I just have a general question.
Yeah, please.
And I'm not knowledgeable about the Constitution of the State of Israel.
Okay.
But I hear all the time, both on our press and in this class and in other contexts, that Netanyahu is holding on to power because he's afraid that when he loses, i.e. loses enough parliament support, given that they don't use our form of government.
Sure.
And he doesn't have enough co-members,
Mhm.
that he loses power,
Mhm.
and therefore will face potential
Corruption charges.
charges in prison. So,
Yeah.
did somehow their Supreme Court rule that their prime minister or premiers are in fact immune while in office? Sort of
So
like
if I'm
all-
not mistaken, if I'm not mistaken, I have to put that caveat there. If I'm not mistaken,
I don't know.
during wartime,
Keep it going.
you know, you can't face the charge.
Keep going.
Yeah, if I'm not
Otherwise
mistaken.
you might be accountable.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, what that analysis that he's kept it going just for his own reasons. I mean, that's widely shared by Israelis and non-Israelis alike. A lot of people believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wondered.
Yes, ma'am.
But I think any religious extremist, whether it's the extremists that are the Jews there,
Mhm.
that are causing all this upheaval,
Mhm.
or the militant and extreme Muslims,
Mhm.
or here, the evangelicals,
Mhm.
anybody who is that extreme has tunnel vision,
Mhm.
and so they're not going to see the other side. I
Mhm.
mean, look, Rabin was murdered by one of his own, by a Jewish extremist.
Yeah, if I'm not
And
mistaken.
I mean, they were ready to make peace at that
Mhm,
time with
mhm,
Arafat, supposedly,
Mhm, mhm.
you know?
So, I mean, what did they say about compromise? Compromise is something that nobody is happy with, right?
And that's
So
the
when
thing.
you have a negotiation, whether it's in business, in politics, and in any field, when you have a negotiation, no one gets 100%
Right.
of what their stated goal is. So that is a part of life, and yeah, it's also true that there are, I guess you use the word extremists, and at the end of the day, in the religious beliefs are religious beliefs, and at the end of the day, or opinions are opinions. People are going to have their very strongly held opinions. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say here is that I don't know what can be done about that. Let me give an example like this, okay? And I'm not picking on anybody, but there is a religious movement called the Jehovah's Witnesses, okay? Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't celebrate Christmas.
Right.
They don't believe in Trinity. They have their own views on things, which in an American context are considered extreme. I mean, of course, they're pacifists. They don't believe in even defending themselves. But what I'm trying to say here is that people, at the end of the day, are going to have their religious beliefs and their religious opinions. If they get guided towards a different opinion, I mean, that's fine. But most people don't become guided to a different religious opinion. So, yes, ma'am.
But also, Judaism has the three factions: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform.
Okay.
I thought when Israel was founded that it was much more secular than it was seen to be, that
So yeah,
as it evolved, as
Yeah,
Israel
so-
grew, all of
it's-
these, and
yeah.
they don't serve in the military.
So there's a lot of elements to that in which you might want to ask, perhaps an Israeli academic to go into more details. But I would say that Israel is an inherently secular society. Yes, there are religious elements to it. They wear the caps and they have Jewish holidays and certain things. Yes, but it is a secular nature. It is a secular society in general. Israel has gay pride marches,
Right.
right? They are not I must say this is going to be controversial. Here's something that'd be radical for Israel maybe. If Israel was ruled by Jewish values and Jewish religion, there would probably be less problems than there are, probably. Because Jews and Muslims have a lot in common. Okay? And the Middle East is a religious people who generally are they share conservative values. So that would be perhaps the radical thing to say. But so what happens in Israeli context, and I don't think anyone can disagree with me about that, is that religion gets employed. It gets employed for certain agendas. Okay, it happens in Israel, it happens in Pakistan, it happens in America, it happens in Mexico, it happens everywhere. That religion gets used, even by people who themselves may not be religious. They'll put on the cap when it's appropriate. They put on the cross when it's appropriate. They go to the church when it's appropriate. Right? Yeah.
Except in Ireland.
Except in Ireland?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the conflict, the conflict between that's pretty much resolved now, I think, but the old conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics, it has its roots in colonialism, but more so not religion as in religious ideology that the Catholic Church is wrong and the Protestants are right, but more so in identity. Identity politics. That one hated the other because of identity politics, not because necessarily that they really believe that strongly in the Catholic Church as opposed to the other church. If you understand what I mean. So, okay. So, any other comments or thoughts, questions?
Going
Yes, ma'am.
back to that quote by King,
Yes.
Yeah.
And
is there an agreement on the term injustice?
that's a
Injustice?
deep question. That's a philosophical question. You know what? Maybe I should ask the teacher, and if he does his class next year, I take it over. Okay, because I can take an entire semester to discuss that question. And this must be God's will, because I'm actually reading
Oh my gosh. How is it reader?
Plato versus the Caveman of Life. Plato versus Aristotle and the struggle for the soul of Western civilization.
Oh, that's deep.
Okay, so actually on page 56, Aristotle. So they're answering your question, and you're answering a question about is there a unified definition of injustice. So this is what this book says. I'm going to share what I said in a minute. What I have to say in a minute. So he says that he uses the word virtue. He says the balance differs depending on where we are in terms of time and situation and who we are. This is one reason Aristotle believed that the practice of virtue was different from different social classes, or for masters or for slaves. And it goes on to say some other things, but his point was that, first of all, it's situational. I will tell you my answer from a Muslim perspective. Now I'll give you my personal answer of how I understand religion. Okay, and I'm very reluctant to give that answer because I'm not here to preach religion. I don't want it to seem that I'm here to be the Muslim John Hagee. Okay. So in Arabic, the word for injustice is zulm. Zulm. T-H-U-L-M. Zulm. Or in slang, zulm with a Z. And zulm, at the core meaning, means to put a thing where it doesn't belong. So I suppose it'd be like, I have this laptop here, and I keep trying to put a highlighter in the laptop. It doesn't, the slot, there's a hole here, but it's not for this, right? So injustice is putting something where something doesn't belong. That would be, I shouldn't say it's a religious opinion. I would say that would be a linguistic opinion. an analysis based on language, putting something where it doesn't belong. But I'm also admitting in that is that human beings will, by nature, often see things differently. But if the nature is healthy, then there are some universals, meaning that all human beings can agree upon. So, if a child is killed, all human beings can agree that this is wrong. Okay, if a woman is raped, all human beings can agree this is wrong. If an innocent person is killed, all human beings can agree this is wrong. So there are certain things that naturally all humans can agree with, regardless of context, regardless of stature or status. So I hope I understood your question. Yes, ma'am.
I have one other personal that I just have to tell you, which is fun.
Okay.
So I retired from the hotel industry, had a divorce, and then all of a sudden, like, what am I going to do? Because I needed to, no one was going to hire me back into the hotel industry at a certain age. So I worked as a fragrance promoter, walking around in Neiman Marcus for Bulgari fragrance. There was a woman in the bay with me, and she was a full-time person there. Her name is Nafis. And we were alone together one evening, and she was gorgeous. I used to just look at her with her black hair, her white skin, her blue eyes.
Do you have her phone number?
She was from Afghanistan. She had come over in '79, I knew that. And I also knew she was Muslim. And I knew, during certain times when she had been fasting, we had kind of a pleasant relationship. And so we were alone together one evening at Neiman Marcus, and I walked over to her and said, Nafis, I'm Jewish, and I know that we come from the same father. Abraham has come, we have a lot of things in common aside from just fragrances. And with that, we had a conversation. Time went by. I didn't see her because I was sent to another store. And a couple of months later, I got a phone call from Cartier Fragrances, the manager from San Francisco in Cartier. And they asked to see me. They were interested in hiring me. And I said, how did you get my name? And they said, Nafis from Neiman Marcus suggested you. And even though we had parted, I guess that one evening where I kind of embraced her, and because we had been friendly to each other, but it was more of a deep-seated that we had a history together. And so, of course, Cartier was one of her brands, and so after that, when I was hired, and I still have a connection, we would be at meetings together, staff meetings, and it was always just a little kind of a smile together.
So I would say that you gave a very good example of humanization. Not dehumanization, but humanization.
Right.
And actually stats show that people tend to not be xenophobic when they've had interactions with others.
Right.
Right? So this is a very nice story that this particular Afghan lady that she had enough pleasant of a memory for you to give you a reference.
Just taking that time. I mean, that night could have been, I could have stayed in my area, but I knew that during this time it had just been that the fasting had been over, and I knew that if she was working, I know she was married, but she had some difficulty.
Well, don't give me a number then. She's married. Don't give me a number.
But beautiful, yes.
Okay.
And an interesting background as coming from Afghanistan and escaping and coming here in '79.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting. I always love to know the backstory about people.
Okay.
It lets us know a lot.
Okay. All right. So any other thoughts or comments?
No, but I have a gardener who's waiting for me.
All
That's
right. Well,
not-
I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Did anybody see 60 Minutes Sunday?
Yeah,
I did.
yeah,
I didn't.
yes.
They interviewed a lot of people involved on the day of October 7th, this past October. What did you think of it? I mean, did you, I can't believe that all those people that were interviewed were making things up. You get to a point where you don't know what happened and what didn't happen.
Well, again, it actually was a week ago Sunday, because this Sunday actually had college basketball, and you and I didn't get to watch.
Oh,
60
oh,
minutes.
okay,
Yeah,
well,
so it's
I
the week
watched that.
before.
Well,
Yeah,
that-
yeah, but the
The
answer,
Final Four I wasn't gonna miss. Yeah.
my reaction was, you know, thank God I'm not there, first and foremost. And second, thank God it didn't happen one way or the other on either side to a member of my own family. And then how would I feel about being held a hostage or not held a hostage? And then being released, knowing that there's still people that are being held. And that whatever you say or do might still have a bearing on even the people that are still being held. How do you, it was very tough to watch. And B, it was hard to try to put myself in the same context. You know, the good news is we, most of us in this room, I would assume, have never been faced by that dilemma. I would hate to be faced by that dilemma. So then you ask yourself about Stockholm Syndrome and all the things you may have learned intellectually about people held against their will. You know, think of John McCain in that prison in Vietnam. So the answer is, all of it would be very tough, but it was very hard to watch,
It was hard to watch.
very hard.
I know, I was very upset.
It is why we should not do war.
Yes, war is really,
And in Danielle's class in the morning about the war in retrospective, we have a class earlier about after the Second World War, how the various European countries made films depicting the war, and that will tear your heart out, so. And to let you know, I know a little bit about the Methodist Church, isn't it John Wesley?
Yeah, John Wesley.
Do all the good you can for all the times you can, for all the people you can. I think there's a wonderful saying by him. I used to give it to my grandchildren.
Primarily his followers and early adherents were poor coal miners in that part of England, and that's his regular audience. So thank you.
Okay. I'll see you
Thank
tomorrow.
you very
Yes, ma'am.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Really a mess.
So any other comments or thoughts?
Did you look at it as I logged it?
Wow. Again, if you do have a hope for the South African outcome, and if there were a de Klerk on that side, and if there were a Mandela on that side, haven't seen either yet per se, but let's assume there was, you're right, you wouldn't be for a two-state solution, you would technically be for a one-state solution. And you'd want one Israel, and it would just represent all the people equally. Kind of like what South Africa ended up doing.
That was my point, and it's not without precedent because people say this notion that the Zionists had advanced that the Jews were somehow not living there. There have been Jews that have been there all the time,
Yeah.
and they live with the Arabs, they live with the Christians all the time. So it's not without precedence. In fact, you know, in terms of Muslim-Jewish relations, if you look from a broad historical analysis, the Muslims and Jews always got along until the emergence of Israel. And that was the only time. That was the only time. Muslims and Jews always got along socially and politically. Again, where did Jews flee? They went to Muslim countries, the Muslim lands. They thrived in Muslim lands. Yes, ma'am.
No, I'm taking in what you're saying.
Okay. Well, so I guess if there's nothing else, did we use the time? I don't know what time it is.
Close, it's a little after
It's
three.
a half hour,
We another half hour?
well, 29 minutes.
29 minutes? Okay.
Oh, you mean the time is up?
I don't know if the time is up. That's what I'm asking.
Huh?
Yes, no other time.
He's just saying he ran out of material. If you're
No, I
saying-
have a bunch of material in here, but but it might bore you. Yes,
This
ma'am.
might be another digression, I don't know.
Yeah.
Dehumanization in
Yeah.
terms of the Nazis.
Yeah.
It wasn't just 6 million Jews, there were 11 million, and people forget that, the eugenesis of these
Yeah.
people aren't fitting in.
Yeah.
And so, to dehumanize, you go forward as you've been
Yeah.
trying to teach us with an agenda for land grabbing and
Yeah.
power.
They tried to eliminate all gypsies. They tried to eliminate almost
Homosexuals.
all of the Polish Catholics. They tried to eliminate, what did you say? It was a huge amount of
It was
people
like, there were 11
But they
million total
weren't-
that we know of.
that we know.
They didn't have to wear a star on them.
Yeah.
And not walk on the streets. They weren't allowed to, not everybody, the Jews were